People that quit their job in a hilarious fashion. How did you do it? I worked for a Midas garage. One week we got a new service manager, and up until that point we always inspected, estimated and sold our own jobs. This new guy wanted to inspect the cars and then check the estimates. Early on a Saturday morning, a girl in her 20s with a baby came into the shop and said her brakes were making noise. I took the ticket, test drove the car, and then pulled it in the shop and then inspected the car. I found the LR brake shoe had gone metal to metal. I mic'd the drum. It was okay. Wheel cylinders and springs, hardware all okay. I estimated the ticket. It came out about $150 to fix the car. I went to the new service manager and handed him the estimate. He went and looked at the car. He didn't even take 30 seconds. And he said I needed to add wheel cylinders, hardware kit and 2 drums to the estimate. I told him all the parts he wanted to replace were okay. He said do it. I just shrugged my shoulders and walked away. He went back to service desk. I walked into a completely crowded waiting area, stood in the middle of the room, and proceeded to tell everyone in the room what the new service manager wanted me to do. I turned around and went to go get my truck to load my toolbox and leave. The service manager tried to stop me from loading my box on my truck. At the time about 5 customers came out and helped me lift the box into the truck, and then started screaming at the service manager. They all wanted their cars put back together and taken off the lifts. It got so bad. One customer called the cops. The service manager called the owner, the cops, and the owner showed up. I was putting the girl's wheels back on. The owner came over to talk to me. I told him what happened and what I did. The owner went over to the service manager, who was surrounded by all the pee-off customers, and fired him. I decided at that point I was still going to quit, because the owner was just acting. He told that service manager to do it. At that point, a few other techs were packing their crap up too. As I was walking up my truck to leave, the girl walked up to me and thanked me. She asked if I knew another shop that could fix her car. I decided I would fix it myself. So we went to the parts store, got the parts, went to my house, and redid the brakes. Not to make this whole story even longer, that was in 1989. We've been married for 24 years now. That service manager couldn't get a job at any shop around. I still see him every once in a while, gathering up the grocery carts at Heb. That was in 1989. We've been married for 24 years now. Unexpected ending. I wrote my 2-week notice on a condolence card that said, "I can't comprehend the depth of your loss. Saw someone else do it online, ordered my own and held on to it until a better job offer came along. It went over well. Frick, I wish I had done this. Don't think my boss would have thought it clever though." I managed to find a telemarketing job as one of my first jobs. It sucked and we were treated like animals, but it was close enough that I could walk there from home. I only intended to stay long enough to afford a car. One day, I realized that I had reached my set dollar amount for a car purchase. As a joke, I strayed as far from the sales pitch as possible. I changed my greeting to things like "Hey" or "Sup." I impersonated celebrity voices. People stopped working around me. They just listened in shock. But it completely backfired. It was my highest day of sales ever. I sold 10 times my average. The pit boss was bewildered, which is why I wasn't fired right away. He listened in on all my calls that day. He begged me to stay, but I was out. It's odd. Every story that I've heard of people changing their script for telemarketing companies, it's always had them get more sales. I'm surprised some companies haven't caught on. Worked as a teen for McDonald's for a month or 2 during the winter in the 90s. We were understaffed and they usually had me working the deep sink and taking money at the drive-thru. One day I come in at 4 PM and the breakfast stuff is pilled to the ceiling at the sink because the day shift rolled out without taking care of it, as per usual. There was a snowstorm this particular day, and with the amount of dishes to do and the increasing frequency of running over and taking money from the window during the dinner rush, my hands were beginning to hurt, then going completely numb. I let the manager know this wasn't working out today and get blown off. Frick it, I crawl straight the frick out of the money window without anyone noticing. At least no one on the staff. I get in my car and drive to the parking lot across the street and watch that dinner rush drive-through line back up out of the lot and down the street. Yes, it was petty. So was the job. I'm sure everyone got over it in short order. I just really like telling the story. As far as some comments suggesting I was acting entitled, I didn't want anything from this company other than the pay for the hours that I worked. I made a choice to terminate the job and I accept that. In fact, I was offered a 10-cent raise, LOL, to come back permanently, which I declined. Either way, this was way more responses than I anticipated over this and it was fun, thanks. Haha, my best friend worked at McDonald's forever and a guy he worked with did this during the dinner rush too. Like, what a way to go out. I used to work for a telecommunications company. My mom was very sick over the last 3 months of her life, so I had to go home most weekends to see her. It's a 6-hour journey to get from where I work to the town where I'm from. When her birthday came around, I requested a couple of days off that I had saved for this specific occasion. Yet, the days off were denied because we were approaching a busy time of year for sales. At this point, I hadn't mentioned what was happening at home, because well, I was always taught that you keep your work and personal lives separate. But I said it to my boss, who, at the time, I saw as a pretty compassionate person. She never took any issue when I got sick or was late for whatever reason. But when I told her, she just looked at me point blank and said, "I don't want to hear this." After that meeting, I went back to my desk and sat there for about 20 minutes, thinking of a solution. That solution was to get my things and just leave. I said goodbye to my friends on my way out, flipped my boss off and just walked out. I went straight to my car and drove back to my hometown that night. It was the best decision I ever made. I got to spend all my time with my mom before she went. We even got to go on a vacation and spend one last week away together because I had the time to do so. I'll never, ever regret walking out that day. Not exactly hilarious, but I had a good chuckle to myself on that drive home. The look on my boss's face will never leave me. It was sweet. To be honest, I didn't think about compassionate leave at the time as my head was in a really odd place at the time. But all in all, I'm a lot better for having left the job. I've moved to a new city and I'm happy in a new job. Really sorry to hear about your mother. You are one of those rare cool people who know where the real priorities lie. As for your manager, the manager fricked up. You are entitled to compassionate leave and it will very likely come up in the exit review. HR is going to have her for breakfast for not going through them first. It's the middle of the lunch rush at the restaurant. It's a gorgeous day but the porch is closed. So myself and this poor middle-aged waitress are taking everyone who expected to sit outside into our room. We're providing crap service because usually there are 5 servers for this many people, not 2. I ask the manager if she wouldn't mind calling people in to open up the porch, which is where all of these people are expecting to sit. She goes off on me. "Are you freaking kidding me?" I exclaim. "You just swore at a manager. You're fired." I was going to be back at college in 2 weeks, so I really didn't give a frick. The thing is, she had to cash me out first. So for those 10 minutes I quietly cussed her out in front of everyone until she started screaming her head off in the middle of the restaurant. She was fired a couple weeks later. That's weird. I work at a restaurant and we constantly talk like this to each other, managers and all. Worked at Arby's. When I planned to quit, I typed up a formal letter of resignation and put it in an envelope. I walked in and handed my boss the envelope and she said, "Are you quitting?" I stammered no as I walked backwards out the door and booked it out of there. I wasn't very good with confrontation back then. This is the least cool way to quit ever. My boss was a C, had me on a disciplinary for something that wasn't my fault, and had my bonus taken off me. So I found a new job, threw out £2,500 worth of stock as technically the food hadn't been stored away correctly, went above my boss and got head office's backing, then handed my notice in, knowing that it fricked his bonus up too. Frick that guy. I like it. I messed up my manager's manager before I left with some horrible technicalities as she had messed loads of people's pay up. I left on my own accord. She got fired the day after I left. Not my story, but one a co-worker told me. The guy who it turned out I had replaced knew he was going to be fired and wanted to quit ahead of time in style. So he enlisted the help of the guy who told the story and spent the entire day fashioning a suit of Spartan armor out of cardboard boxes in the back. Then, right as they were closing, because he was still a decent guy and didn't want to make a scene, he donned his armor, walked up to the atone manager, saluted with his cardboard sword, and with a straight face asked permission to leave your employment to go on campaign, so without waiting for a reply, he saluted again and walked out. I would have thought some details were embellished, but the guy showed me the video. God, I wish the people I supervised quit like that instead of just ghosting one day. My story actually occurred yesterday. I work, for a small landscaping company. It was literally me, my boss, and a coworker. It's important to note that I'm also in the DEP program to head to Navy boot camp in February. My boss had always been a general butthole, making half jokes about how he was just losing money by employing us and how we were just causing him undue stress, or talking crap about every past employer or employee of his, and making extremely judgmental comments about everyone he came into contact with. Tuesday, I realized that we would be mowing on Wednesday, and typically that means that we get back late. I had a mandatory Navy meeting I need to be at. I told him. He told me it was no big deal because he had family stuff he needed to back for. Yesterday, at about 12:30, I checked to make sure that we were still going to be back by 3 or 3:30 so I could attend my meeting. He replies, "Nah, I pushed back my stuff so we don't have to be back by 4:30. I would miss 3/4 of the meeting by being back that late." So I reminded him about my meeting. He shrugged and told me, and I quote, "Well, it sucks for you. Tell them your boss is in butthole." I had turned in my 2-week notice the Friday before last, so as of yesterday I only had 2 days left working for him. I proceeded to have my dad meet us at the next yard we mowed. Boss told me to get back in the mowing truck, and I said no. I told him that if he wouldn't allow me to prioritize my mandatory meetings over the job that I had 2 days left at, I wouldn't prioritize his schedule. I told him to text me on Friday for when I can pick up my paycheck and left. I worked overnights at a gas station through college. After being scheduled to work my 3rd Christmas in a row, on Christmas morning, I gave my boss a card that said I quit. Voice. Not me, but a great story. One guy I worked with hired a mariachi band to follow him into our boss's office. Unfortunately for him, the boss was on vacation, so he ended up quitting over the phone and was so pissed he spent the $300 on the band. I worked for a used car dealership briefly as a salesman. Frick car sales. By the way, I was moving to a new city with my girlfriend, now wife, when she went to grad school, so I had a definite end date in July. I was living with my parents, so I didn't have many expenses. I asked for a Saturday off to go to my wife's brother's wedding. They informed me that we weren't allowed to take Saturdays off. A few days later, I had sold a car, but there was a delay that was not my fault. My mother and I were supposed to get lunch together. I asked if I could go and have someone else close the sale. My manager informed me that if I did, that person would get paid for it. I spent over 2 hours standing around with my proverbial dong in my hand while my mother waited at a Ruby Tuesday for me. Then, a few days before my brother-in-law's wedding, I saw someone put in his 2 weeks notice. The manager looked him up and down and said, "Nah, you're done now." So what do I know? They're buttholes who don't respect me, and if I try to give them customary notice, they'll shitcan me. So frick it. I decide to go to the wedding. It's 8:30 on a Saturday morning and my shift is supposed to start at 9 o'clock. I call my manager. "Yeah, Craig, I won't be in today." "What? You have to come in?" Number. I actually quit. And then I went to the wedding and had a wonderful time. It wasn't hilarious, I guess, but deeply satisfying. My friend quit Taco Bell right in the middle of his shift by writing "frick you, I'm out" on the floor with the big sour cream gun. I was witness to a classic quit job. Was out a local pizza place with my family. It was around 6ish and the place was packed with families and other patrons, mainly HS kids, for the dinner rush. All of a sudden this kid comes running out from behind the counter where you get your food. He whips off his shirt and shorts and jumps on a table in front of a packed restaurant and exclaims very loudly, "I'm quitting because the manager that runs this place is a total butthole and won't give me a day off. Oh yeah, I pee in the pizza sauce too. Thank you. Have a good night," and grabbed his clothes, dismounted and then ran out the door. It was dead quiet for about 5 minutes. Then the manager came out and apologized, and 10 minutes later, people went back to their meals. Still remember that like it happened yesterday. I had landed a job at an IT company that had been struggling the last few years. It was a nightmare scenario, but they were promising the sky and moon, so I decided to take it anyway on a 6-month contract to hire basis. I was there 2 months and it was a full-on dumpster fire. I won't bore with the details, but after a month they had so many people quitting. I got moved to the tech support. At first I was told it was a temp thing. Then in the all-company meeting, my boss just took upon himself to make it permanent without really asking me. That was the last draw. Within a few days, I had found another gig and went into his office and told him I was taking the rest of the day off. This is how the rest of the conversation went. Boss: okay Platinum, we'll see you tomorrow. Me: yeah, I don't think I'm coming in tomorrow. Boss: okay, so when do you think you'll? Me: or the next day after that or the day after that. Boss: Platinum, what are you saying? Me: well Jeff, I'm quitting, and this is my last day. Boss: you can't quit. You have a 6-month contract. Me: Jeff, you can certainly try and force me to work here, but you really can't. So I'm leaving now. I started to walk out and he followed me, yelling at me that I couldn't just quit. I had a contract. He's going to call my recruiter. Then his last attempt to insult me was the best. His last words to me as I exited the building was, "I'll make sure you never work in this industry again." That was almost 5 years ago. The company went under 8 months after I left, and Jeff is now selling insurance somewhere in Nevada. Yeah, blackballing someone from an entire industry is very, very illegal. A guy from my work years ago came in high and the boss figured it out. She brought him into the office to fire him and with a cop to escort him out. For his final stand, he came real close to her face and said, "In a world of darkness, where you carried the only light, I still wouldn't follow you," and left. I've seen couldn't let water downhill on a management survey before too, but that one is also great. I worked as a mechanic at Pep Boys several years ago. While I worked there, some of us discovered that if the drainage pipe in the shop were pressurized, the toilet would shoot water out of the bowl. The service manager at my store was a piece of crap. The day that I quit, I waited until he went into the bathroom to take a dump. I filled up a cheater, a device used to seat a tire onto a wheel, and released about 200 C all at once into the drainage pipe. The toilet freaking exploded. The manager screamed, and then comes storming out of the bathroom covered in crap. That's a really crappy thing to do. I used to work in invoicing. My boss was a massive, micromanaging bee, the type that has literally nothing better to do than nitpick because they, for some reason, think that that's how you properly manage. This went on for about 2 years before I'd had it. I took a big old dump in the bathroom in our office. Total of about 6 people that worked there. Precariously placed my boss's business card on the massive log, and then left it there in the toilet before going to her desk and quitting right then and there. She tried to come back at me with some spiteful crap, but I shut her down, telling her that she's a crap boss and she's the sole reason that I'm quitting this job. Best day ever. Best dump ever too, now that I think of it. I went all freaking out. I gave my boss a respectful letter of resignation and thanked him for the opportunity. Jitwrecked. Straight savage. I worked at Home Outfitters when I was 17. Worked cash 1 day per week and stocked shelves, cleaned up the mess of the back room a few other times during the week. Now when I say mess, imagine everything you need to clean the place, plus overstock, plus using the freaking cardboard crusher as a storage unit. This back room was a mess. Anyway, one of my cash days I rang up a discount wrong. Ended up charging a guy $72 for his purchase rather than $85. Boss yelled at me, told me I was going to pay for it and that he was going to be speaking to the manager about possibly letting me go. There was his mistake. I was working this job as extra cash. I didn't need the money. First thing I did in the 4 hours I had left for this shift, I relabeled the entire vacuum and kitchen sections wrong. I am saying wrong names, pricing, stock codes, everything. 2 hours left. I called the province's workplace safety board and emailed them over 20 photos from my phone on problems in the back room on the floor. I then turned off all the cash registers, minus the one being used, right before the 7 o'clock rush. These things were ancient. They took about 20 minutes to boot up. I then asked to see my manager for a moment. He approached me at the front where I said the following: "Good luck with the labor board. I'm out of here." It was the best moment of my life at the time, but in hindsight I should have just left. Funniest part of this whole ordeal was a friend who worked there as well mentioned that it took them all 4 or 5 hours after closing to relabel everything. The machines shorted out when they tried to boot them all, and the next day they were shut down for 48 hours to get their backroom sorted. Manager got fired by corporate. The assistant manager who yelled at me quit because of the pressure. And for my cherry on top, they had mentioned at orientation in writing that if you had first aid courses you got 25 more per hour. I worked a total of 300 plus hours for this place. I emailed my first aid course, that I had through being a part-time army reservist, to corporate, and they sent me a check in the mail for the 25 per hour. $75 was a lot to 17-year-old me. Now that I reread this, I was a bit of a dong at that time. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.